Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and this will be another video on HTMX. The goal of this video is going to be exploring a lot of the many other directives that exist within HTMX. So I'm going to be borrowing this Express server that I made for a previous video in HTMX where I talked about different ways to send data to the server. Figured you don't want to see me make an Express server for every single HTMX video. So what I'm going to do is let's just actually get this server going. Okay, so I'm going to type in node -- watch and server.js to get the server going. And I'm going to want to go to HTMX's website. And what I want to do is explore some of these other properties. So I'm going to create a whole sort of new page here. So I'm going to create a new folder that's called props. And in there, we're going to have a file called index.html. And we are going to put our HTML boilerplate there, and our HTMX script tag right over there. So that we have that. Good. Okay. So over here I have the HTMX documentation, which is awesome. I love a good set of docs. Okay, I've read a lot of docs for a lot of different libraries, and definitely like it when there's good amount of detail and a good amount of like examples and reference and whatnot. Okay, so we go to the docs. Let's see, is that what I want to go? Actually, I'd rather go to the reference section. Actually, kind of goes over the different things that are available in there. So in previous videos, I have talked about a lot of these main attributes. There's a few of these we haven't really talked about. Let's talk about hx on. Okay, so first let's just create like a route that'll handle what I need to handle. So let's just create a quick route /routes. Oh, we don't need to do that. Just say app.get, and we're just gonna call it examples /1 res. And don't need this. Okay, there's a comma missing. Okay, there we go. And all I really want to do is just send some HTML. Okay, so we'll send a div that has an ID of cheese. Okay, and then there'll be an h1 that says requested content and a p tag. Okay, and then we'll say here is some random text. Okay, so now we just have that, so we can go grab some HTML. Okay, so here I have let's go to here. Here's our props.html, and actually just open that website too. Localhost 3000 /props. Okay, and oh yeah, I don't have anything on that website yet, so let's actually put something in here. h1 examples. Let's add a div in here, which will have an ID of display. Okay, that's where we'll display things. Okay, now if I refresh this page, okay, I literally just woke up, so I am all sorts of rusty. Okay, examples, good. Okay, so we're all set up there. Okay, so now with this HTMX on, what it does, it allows you to kind of create, it allows you to handle events, essentially. But so an example use case of this would be like, let's say I were to do this button. Okay, and then let me just keep that how that is. We're going to target that display, but what really we want to do is hit examples 1. We're going to target this display div. So when I click this button, it should replace that div with that content. So I hit refresh, I hit get. Okay, didn't quite do that. Is that the right route. Oh, I spelled examples wrong. That would help. Okay, so I want to refresh here. And I want to click this. And you see that content gets injected in there from that request. So that's all fine and good. So where does the hx-on come into play? Now this hx-on property allows me to also trigger events and actually specify the JavaScript that happens when those events get triggered. Okay, so if I click like hx-on here, we can see the documentation. And you can see here I can do like hx-on-click and then specify when something happens. Where this is particularly useful is when you want to trigger off the actual inbuilt HTMX requests, where like you want to do something before the request or after request. So in this case, let me just kind of clean this button up so it's much more easier to add properties to it. Okay. Okay, so that looks a bit better. Now in here, I would want to do something like an hx-on. And then I would say, hey, before the request. What I'd like to do is just, yeah, I guess just do a simple alert. We'll just kind of do the example from the docs, just to kind of illustrate it. And then here, after request, we do that. Okay, so the idea is that this event's going to get triggered when the before request event happens, which will happen when, and actually put hx trigger here so we know that this particularly gets triggered when it's a click. Okay, so now if I refresh this page, what should happen is I should get an alert, then it's going to fill in the text, then I'm going to get another alert. So see, there's the before request alert, and there's the after request alert. Okay, so I guess the after request happens after the request is completed, but before the render. So that makes me wonder what other states are there. Let's see if we can find a list of those events. Reference HTMX events. So after swap. So if I were to do this after swap, that should probably do it after the code is swapped. So let's try that out. Get before the request is made. Okay, then the swap happened, but I didn't get the second alert. hx-on after swap. Let's see here. Triggered after the DOM has been settled. Triggered after the new content has been swapped in. So let's try this after settled maybe. Okay, or after settle. There we go. And again, these are supposed to be kebab case versus camel case when you're expressing them as directives. So hit refresh. Before request. Yeah, we're still not seeing that second alert. Okay. After request. After settle. Triggered after HTMX has initialized a node. After onload. After request. Triggered after the DOM has been settled. After swap. Why wouldn't this work after swap? hx-on after swap. Yeah, that makes sense to me. But you could also do it this way. I could take one colon and just write HTMX after swap. Although that should be HTMX. And let's try that out. Okay, before request. Yeah, still. Okay, so there must be some other little twist to that one. But the idea is there are all these events that you can key off of. Not triggering that exactly the way I figured it would. Again, after requests did work. So let me show just to show you that that still did work. Before request, after request, that worked all well. Okay. But that's what you can do with hx-on. You can just say, hey, you know, whenever this event occurs, and you could also just do normal DOM events, and then just you can trigger a function or whatnot. So very like traditional HTML where you could use like the on-click property, but you have access to a few more different types of events. Cool. Now back to on select. Okay, so select basically, this is pretty neat. Okay, so let's get rid of these hx-ons. So I don't really need that. But let's say the idea is we're going to get this HTML here. Okay, so basically the HTML you see that's returned by this request. But let's say I only really want one of these properties. Okay, I really want that p tag. Okay, what I can do is I can pass in a CSS selector to select specifically what I want to use for the replacement. So I can say hx-select, and what I want to do is I'm going to select the ID of cheese, but I want the p tag that is a descendant of that so theoretically it should just be this p tag now. So next time I do this, this should not show up if I did this right. And that's exactly what happened. Because what it does is it's going to take that HTML that comes out of the request and allow me to select a specific piece out of it. So this can be really useful when you have multiple full pages. But then but you don't necessarily want to constantly always render the full page. You just want to swap out a particular piece of that page into the page that into wherever you're putting it. Okay, so that's pretty neat. Cool. And then hx swap out of bounds kind of goes with that, or actually select out of bounds. Basically allows you to target something else. So for example, let's say I were to create another div here with the ID of cheese. Okay, so if I were to do hx-select out of bounds, equals, and let me see, we'll call this bread actually. What I am going to do is I'm going to update the server and make this h1 have the ID of bread. Okay. What it will do is I'm saying, hey, I want to target the thing that has an ID of bread, and it's going to swap wherever it is, swap with wherever else there's the ID of bread. So essentially, this h1 is going to swap with this div here. So it's just going to swap them out. So let's see if that works. So and essentially, what I should see happening here is that actually I should see the reverse, where the h1 is going to be on the bottom and the p tag is going to be on the top. So if I refresh this, and that's exactly what we get. So you see the h1 ends up going over here because it gets swapped out of bounds based on the ID. So the ID of bread goes to wherever the ID of bread is on the page currently. Okay, and again, it should, what I want to do double check is whether it swapped it, did an inner HTML swap or an outer HTML swap. So let's see here. If I go here, the h1 of bread, yeah, it did a full outer swap, which means it didn't get put inside the div, it replaced the div. But this was an inner HTML swap over here, so that should be inside the div of display. And see, there's the p tag inside, not replacing the div of display, but inside the div of display. So again, inner HTML versus outer HTML swaps. So that's how those two properties work. Okay, we talked about vals in the other video. Let's see if there's any other really good ones I want to make sure I mention. We talked about include in the other video. Okay. These are all things that just kind of modify the requests. So params, if you want to kind of modify what gets included in the requests. So you have a big form, but you only want certain things to get sent over. Vars, add values dynamically to the parameters, submit with the requests. And then there's like the CSS classes. Now the cool thing about these is that they allow you to style. So this is what you can do is you can create animations when certain things are happening. Okay, so let's take a look at what they are. So you have apply to either the element or the element specified with the hx indicator while the request is ongoing. Okay, apply to a target after content is swapped, removed after it is settled. After content is swapped, move after settled. The duration can be modified via hx swap. Okay, so let's try something here. Okay, so I'm going to create like a style tag. And what I want to do is do like an .htmx-settling class, because that's the class that's going to get added. Okay, and we're going to just do background yellow. Sounds good. So the idea is that when something's settling, we should see it have a yellow background for like a moment. So if I refresh this, and you saw that yellow background for a second, if I do it again. Okay, so this is moment when it's settling. Now, more useful would be like an animation. Okay, so you can like kind of animate it kind of coming in or something like that. And let's try some of these other properties. So htmx.htmx, and this is applied. So swapping is applied to a target before any content is swapped. Removed after it is swapped. The duration can be modified via hx-swap. And then settling. Well, actually, it's swapping. Okay, so at some point it'll be red and some point it'll be yellow, so we can kind of see when both happen. Okay, we didn't see the red in that case. So, and again, that's applied to a target before any content is swapped, removed after it is swapped. Okay. Let's go back to hx-swap real quick, just see how we can modify the duration. Transition, settle, swap. Okay, so here we go. Inner swap, inner HTML, swap, and you can take a look how long it takes to swap and settle. So let's modify that. hx-swap. It's by default inner HTML. Now what I want to do is make the swap last 3 seconds, and I want to make settle last 3 seconds, so that we can visibly see these classes kind of take place. Okay. So that should alter the time for these states, which means the time that those classes will be applied. Okay, so I hit here. Okay, and then see that yellow background sticks around for 3 seconds. Now, probably we're not seeing the red because there's no content in this div to begin with. So let's put some content in this div here and put some content in display here, so that way there's something visibly there beforehand. Okay, so now if I hit get, still okay. So exactly where that class is being applied, little you can set a little amount of the time. The HTMX will wait after response. Okay. And again, these are all the different types of swaps you can do. So the inner HTML and outer HTML we talked about. Now let's try before begins. Okay, so if I try before begin, and again, what that's going to do is insert the response before the target element. So it doesn't replace it, doesn't put it inside it, puts it before it. Okay, so before begin. So let's see how that works. So there's the original div. So now we're going to see things. We should see at least the p tag end up before this text. And again, there's some time we have to wait. There we go. In that case, it still replaced it. Let's see here. Oh, I think it's because I put the uppercase letter in there. There we go. Let's try that again. And let's actually shorten these times. Just make it 1 second. 1 second, because we kind of showed the deal there. And there you go. You see the p tag is beforehand. Again, you see the select out of bounds still does its own thing. Okay, the out of bounds isn't affected by the swap property. That's going to be separately affected. We'll look into that in a moment. Okay, but let's just first try out some of these other ones. Okay, so after begin would be right after. So let's see here, before end. Okay, so this is going to be before end and after end are going to do it within the div, but it would do it before or after anything that already exists in the div. Okay, so in this case, theoretically, it should be after this text node if I do after end. So if I do after end, okay, let's try it out. I hit that. We wait a second. Okay, and see it is after that. Let's just take a look at where it is here in the DOM. So if I open up the div of display, we see here's some random text. The p tag is not inside of the div. It is outside. Okay. So let's just think about that one for a second. After end, insert the response after the, oh, yeah, that's right, after the target element. It should be before and insert the response as a last child. So if I wanted to do the effect that I wanted, it would be before end. So that way it's before the element ends. So let's try that out. I hit that. And then I open up the div. And yep, there it is. The p tag's after the text node. Okay, but still inside the div. So you can really kind of target where you want it that way. So it's pretty neat in that sense. Here it deletes the target element. And there's some other fun ones. Now let's take a look at go back to the swap out of bounds, because I would like to explore sort of what does affect, can we change the way that swaps? So let's see here. If we go back to reference, and I'm going to go back to hx-select-oob. Let's see, are we allowed to like specify anything else? This button will then select the element. So okay, so basically the way this reads is that it's going to do an outer HTML swap regardless. Select, the attribute is almost always paired with hx-select. Here's an example. Unless maybe hx-select allows you to kind of switch it up. No. An hx-select, again, we saw that we can target a specific thing. Okay. Cool. Let's go back to our CSS here. Then we also have HTMX indicator, a dynamically generated class that will toggle visible. So basically make something invisible or visible when an HTMX class is present. So to kind of see this in action, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and we're going to create a div that has ID, indicator. And what this is going to do is that it's going to be like cheese. Okay, but the idea is you're only going to be able to see it when we're kind of mid-flight. Okay, so I'm going to take that indicator. Okay, and what I want to do is make its opacity, I'm going to say font size, we'll say 2em, so it's a very large font. And we're going to make its opacity 0. Okay, but then what's going to happen is at some point, that same element might get .htmx indicator dot indicator. So at some point it might have both. Okay. A dynamically generated class that will toggle visibility when an HTMX request class is present. Okay. Indicator. Okay, so actually the way this is actually going to work is you have to use the hx indicator, the element to put the HTMX request class on during the request. A dynamically generated class or the element specified with the hx indicator while the request is going on will toggle visibility opacity 1 when an HTMX request class is present. Okay. Okay. That works for me. Indicator HTMX indicator. Well, actually, let's just see if this does what we think it's going to do first. So the idea is I should click the button and then you see the cheese and then it goes away. So then I should be able to do hx indicator. And that's going to be the thing with the idea of indicator. So the idea is that that's going to have 0 opacity, but its opacity will change the minute we click the button. Okay, but we see cheese already, so that means we are seeing it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is display none. Refresh. Right, did I spell indicator right? ID equals, oh wait, I did a dot, that's why. Oh, you can tell it's a Sunday morning. Oops. Okay, hash for an ID, because it's an ID, Alex. And hit get. Okay, so theoretically, what we should have seen is that in that gap of time, we should have seen, now let's just examine what's happening in the DOM first. So I'm gonna refresh that. I wanna highlight this cheese here, because I wanna see what the change of classes is when I click this. Okay, it really didn't have any change of class. Or if it did, it was very brief. So let's take a look here. Div indicator. We do see that the class property shows up for a moment. Okay, and I did see that the htmx-settling class was up here for a moment. Okay, which is why we see the background color. Okay, but I never saw the swapping class occur. Okay, so again, if we focus right here for a moment, let's do that again. Right there, you'll see the change in classes when I click the button. See HTMX swapping. Oh, swapping was there for a moment, but we did not see it go red. So let me examine that again one more time. So focus your eyes right there. I'm going to click the button. There's class HTMX swapping. It's very quick. Oh, there's why I wrote HTMX, not HTML. Whoops. So now if I do this, you see red, then yellow. Okay, cool, that works. Okay. But we don't see the indicator cheese changing for a prolonged period of time. So let's take a look back and first take a look at hx indicator. Make sure we fully understand that attribute allows you to specify an element that will have an HTMX request. Are we allowed to specify the time? That last class. Inline, display, none. Okay, so HTMX indicator. So let's see here. Okay, I see. So the way I'm reading this is that we would add the class of HTMX indicator onto here. Okay? Because that's going to be the initial state. And then what we wanted to change it to then gets defined by the HTMX. So basically here, what I would want to target, well, actually, let me think about that for a second. Then what I would want to change it to then is done through the HTMX request class. Okay, so then I would go here and I would change opacity to 1. Okay, so theoretically, if that's right, and I'm going to comment out this class for a moment because it's going to cause specificity issues. Okay, so theoretically, if I refresh this, cheese should still be gone. Yep, I don't see cheese. But I still don't see it during the request. Porque? Okay, HTMX indicator is doing the job of making it opaque. And again, the div ID indicator, we'll go over here. HX indicator is the thing with the ID of indicator, which is this over here. Okay, so let's see here. Refresh. Again, I want to take a look at, I'm keeping an eye on this right here. Okay, and then I'm looking for it to have get that HTMX request class added. So if I click get, no, I'm not seeing that happen. So let's think about this. Okay, so essentially it needs to be in the parent hierarchy. So I think it's more like the location of this div that's the issue. It has to be, because right now if I take a look at the parent hierarchy of this button, okay, the button's parent is body. So it's not, this div is nowhere in that sort of hierarchy. So if I were to put this button in a div, you know, which, and then put this indicator in the div, let's see if that makes the fix. Okay, so now they're sort of in the same chunk of the tree. Okay, although technically this should naturally still work because they are, oh no, 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 it wouldn't. But I need to make sure I put the button closing tag over here. Ah. I want the button. Okay. So let's try this out. And again, I want to make sure I'm going to open up this div here because I really want to pay attention to this right here. So if I click the button, which no longer says get because I have the gets over here, Control X, let me put that get right back there. Refresh the page. Again, I want to take a look, examine this div, and I want to keep an eye on this indicator here, see if it gets the HTMX request class. Try that again. Yeah, so the cheese doesn't still appear there. Now, what will get the class is the button. So if you take a look at the button, you should see the HTMX request class get added there, because that's going to happen by default. So you don't even need to use the hx indicator property to do that. But if I do that, let's see here, get, looking at like the class, so that I can keep an eye on it. Oh, nope, happened too fast. So again, keeping an eye on the button. Okay, so it must be the target where we're seeing the class. So again, looking at this over here, refresh. I hit get, HTMX swapping, HTMX-settling, and nothing. I never see the HTMX request class. I think it's because since the server is running on my computer, the request is completing almost instantaneously. So I just think it's happening probably too fast, I'm assuming. Again, if you have any more insight, feel free to leave it in the comments. But yeah, that's an exploration of some of the other properties in HTMX. But there's a lot to do here. I mean, and again, just a little bit goes a long way, as you see in some of my other videos, where you could just use the basics of HTMX and really take care of many different situations, make a lot of different situations in your JavaScript, or eliminate the need for JavaScript in many different places, where it's really you're just creating your chunks of HTML, your templates, and then just swapping them out as needed, and it's pretty cool. So again, my name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.